Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we continue our Courtroom Cinema Festival with the classic 1957 Sidney Lumet film, 12 Angry Men.
Let's dive on in! All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us on all the spaces and places that people find good media. How's that? Did I tighten it up nice?
Nice. I love that you acknowledge it, too. That makes it better.
I just want accolades. I want praise.
You'll get them by them liking and subscribing.
That's fair. I'll take
That's
that.
how you measure that.
That is true.
All right, let's get into this. Our third installment of the Courtroom Cinema Festival. The oldest film we've done, I think, since we transferred and rebranded over to the Deep Dive Film School side of this and got on YouTube and everything. So, yeah, interesting. 1957, Sidney Lumet, written by Reginald Rose. Sidney Lumet, one of my just all-time favorites.
Oh, yeah, same here.
Especially if you look at his full catalog. We got Dog Day Afternoon, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, Murder on the Orient Express, The Verdict, Network, Serpico, and, of course, The Wiz.
Sounds to me, fellas, like old garbage guts here done forgot the crow commandments again.
Fellas, I did not forget the crow commandments, please.
I forgot he did The Wiz. Oh,
He did.
I mean, it's like William Friedkin did Jade. Everybody has their one, right?
He's allowed one, okay?
Yeah, you're allowed a mulligan. You're allowed a do-over. So yeah, this obviously based on a play. And this is one of those heavy hitters that I think they show you in film school, correct? I mean, this is one of those kinds of movies.
I remember even watching this in like social studies.
Yeah,
in
I watched
high school.
I watched it in high school. I think in like a civics class or something like that, which is interesting because doing some research on it, this actually Justice Sotomayor, this was what made her want to go into law, was watching this movie. But she also would tell all of her students, this is not what you do if you were in a jury. Like, you can't bring in another piece of evidence and be like, I found this switchblade on the street. Or like, let's reenact walking down this hallway. Like, those are all things you're not supposed to do. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't make for riveting cinema here.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because that definitely would never happen or totally be cool in any jury room. For the most part, we have this festival as Courtroom Cinema, not really a courtroom movie, but I think the principles of what those types of movies try and say and do are all captured inside of this kind of behind the scenes look of what happens in a jury. So maybe that's why they treated it a little more like a courtroom, but
I agree with that. But I think the other thing that's funny is to be able to say, as we talked about on last week's episode, so one of the most inaccurate representations of sort of courtroom fanfare would be 12 Angry Men, and one of the most accurate would be My Cousin Vinny. You would not have thought that ever. You would
before
have thought
we started
the
this
opposite,
festival,
right? Like
it's true.
If this was a bar trivia question, you'd be like, well, of course it's 12 Angry Men. It's like, actually, you'd be wrong. So let's go down the list here of sort of our cadre of characters.
For sure. Yeah, real quick here. We got 12 jurors, no names, just numbers.
Just numbers.
We at a certain point, we identify them with probably the job that they've done, or that we kind of get a little backstory on each of them. But we got Henry Fonda, L.J. Cobb, Ed Begley, and we know his son, Ed Begley Jr.
Yes.
Martin Balsam, E.G. Marshall, Jack Warden, and Jack Klugman, who was the last to pass away of this entire cast. So there's no longer anyone alive in this cast. But I mean, I guess you take most movies from the 50s and it's probably a crapshoot.
I mean, it's like I always say, anytime I watch a movie from the 50s that has a dog or cat in it, I'm like, that thing's been dead for a really long time. I know that's a little morbid, but I just it always enters my head and I'm like, damn. But or a TV show that has a laugh track from the 50s.
Dick Van Dyke reruns on Nick at Night. Those people are.
Yeah, those people are super dead. Yeah, and I love this. Obviously, makes you wonder if this is something that Tarantino got the idea for with Reservoir Dogs, of like these characters only being able to be represented not through a name, but through sort of, obviously in his movie it's colors, but here it's just numbers. I love that. And some of these actors, you ran down and went through the actors' names, but I think doing a little bit of a poll of who these people are. One, our foreman, played Colonel Cathcart in Catch-22, Martin Balsam.
He's also in All the President's Men, I think.
That's right, he is. Number 2, if you ever need a guy to play your little pipsqueak pushover, get the guy that voices Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. I don't know if you
Is that who that is?
Yes!
Whoa! I was like, I recognized the voice, and I was like, "Who's it?"
Didn't it immediately raise your childhood hackles? Like it immediately.
Yes, but I could.
Like, oh my god!
I couldn't identify it. That is so funny.
You know what's even weirder though, but I remember from years ago.
He's the guy with the cough drops, right?
Yes, and he's just he's the little pipsqueak that's like, oh no, just wait a minute, you can't push me around. And you're like, yeah, you can. You're Piglet. But even beyond that, that same actor was in the cinematic version of A Raisin in the Sun, and he plays a traveling salesman who ends up being like a total horrible racist. So if you ever want to hear Piglet be a racist, go back and watch the cinematic version of A Raisin in the Sun.
Negro families are happier when they live in their own communities.
Number 3, you mentioned Lee Cobb. Most people are going to know him as Detective Kinderman from The Exorcist, which is one of my. He is such a lovable grandpa in The Exorcist that you would never think of him being that hard bullet-nosed kind of like guy that he is here, right? Hey guys, it's Sherlock on the edit, and I realized a fun bit of trivia here. Lee Cobb played Juror number 3 in the 1957 version of 12 Angry Men, and Detective Kinderman in the original William Friedkin Exorcist. Then, in 1997, William Friedkin directed a remake of 12 Angry Men and had George C. Scott play Lee Cobb's role of Juror number 3. The funny part is, in 1990, William Peter Blatty directed his own sequel to The Exorcist called Legion and cast George C. Scott as Detective Kinderman, the role originally played by Lee Cobb. I guess they're both good at playing scrunched-up sourpuss characters with noses like sledgehammers. Anyway.
Yeah, and he's that guy this whole movie too. He really probably has the toughest job of anyone in this movie, because he has to stick to his guns through this whole time. Jack Warden, I think we've all seen throughout the years. I can't place one specific thing. He's kind of that guy.
He's definitely that guy, I would say.
At least for our era. He may have done stuff more in his prime in the 50s and 60s maybe that we haven't seen, but
and that's
definitely a recognizable face.
That's Juror number 4, correct? Now, he's the one who never...
I don't remember.
He's the one who never...
He's the one who has... He has ball tickets. He wants to go to the game.
Oh no, yeah, him. Yeah. He has ball tickets to go to a game, and he has the hat... he has the hat that they talk about in Caddyshack.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh? Oh, it looks good on you, though.
That's the hat that he has. Then we have, and the guy who never sweats, that's wearing the glasses and is rubbing his nose, who played Upston Pratt from the segment "They're Creeping Up on You" from Creepshow, where at the end of it he's full of cockroaches. That's him. That's that same actor. Obviously, John Klugman played Oscar from The Odd Couple. And I think that some of these other characters are also more of that guys that you've seen at times, but you're not entirely sure from where.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, I may have skipped over a few names that we may have missed, but for the most part, I think we got kind of the main things. Kind of interesting. I don't know if I realized this, but this is Lumet's directorial debut.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Obviously he's very young. He's very young when he did this, if this was in 57, and he went on to make movies into the 2000s. So, but quite an interesting pick for a first movie. Obviously based off a play, you could see why. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 rooms that we get in this whole movie. But 95% of it is in this juror's room. Immediately we, opening shot, we get the pillars of the courthouse, and we kind of scan down the hallway and go into the courtroom for just a second, just so we can kind of get an idea of the characters and also see the defendant that they're talking about. It's kind of interesting the way they shot this movie. And if you've ever read, if you're a filmmaker and ever want to find a book that is outstanding that every person that's going to be a filmmaker should read, is Sidney Lumet's Making Movies. It's one of the all-time great filmmaking books, if you ask me. It goes through all the aspects of everything, but with his point of view, and just, it's not only a fun read, but you learn a lot about how to make a film. Anyways, just throwing that out there as a side shot. But at the beginning of this movie, we kind of see all the cameras positioned above the eyes and throughout above everyone's eyes, so we can kind of get a, the perspective of who these people are. But throughout the movie, it gets lower and tighter on them through the whole movie, and it creates this weird, unique feeling where we're kind of unaware of it emotionally, but you definitely notice like it's ramping up things, right? It's everything's getting
he starts using
tighter and tighter
lenses, right? And so that depth of field is squished in until, like, again, we're filling the frame with these actors' faces.
The idea that we start at the top and kind of throughout the movie just go down and below, where traditionally from a cinematography perspective, you see in Raising Arizona the big bad guy to make them look bigger and badder when the Coens are up looking like this, right? And then when you want to make someone feel small, you kind of shoot down on them like that. And it's kind of interesting to think of a movie that slowly does this to you throughout the movie and creates this tension, not only with the camera work and the lighting and everything, but also with the heat inside of the jurors' room. It also with just the conversation itself and the weird, wild, examination that this movie is. Not only about just the human thought process, but just the judicial process, all this stuff. Pretty wild.
Well, I think that, and I think that from a director standpoint, I definitely noticed once we were kind of in it. I didn't notice the gradual slide into it, but I did notice by the end how tight our shots had become. But I think right from the very beginning, two directorial / acting choices that are our very first scenes that I thought were really fascinating is one, yes, our one little glimpse of the actual courtroom and the absolute lazy, lackadaisical way that the judge is rattling off everything to the jury. There's a boy's life on the line, and he's like, now you men do have a very important job to do. And he's like, the judge could give two shits.
He's very monotone. I definitely.
He's very monotone. He just does not care at all, right? Mm-hmm. And we see all the jury members in the jury box, and then what happens is they all stand up, they walk out, and our camera turns, and we get the only shot of the boy, of the defendant, and he's young. I mean, they say he's 18, but he might as well be 12, right? I mean, he is this little, like, wide-eyed kid who looks terrified, and then we have maybe, like, it's got to be in the Guinness Book of World Records for the slowest dissolve from that into the jury deliberation room. It takes so long that we're still watching these guys file in, and we can still see the boy's face superimposed over it.
Love it.
And I thought that is brilliant. I mean, again,
that's the reason you make this a movie instead of a play, right? It's little things like that.
Those little moments where you can really sit on it for that long and just be like, wow. And then it does the same thing when we leave the jury deliberation room at the end of the film, as number 8 is helping is helping up he's helping up number 3, Lee Cobb. When Henry Fonda is helping up Lee Cobb at the very end of the movie, we do another super, super slow dissolve, and we don't even see how the case ends. We dissolve from
we don't
there
need to
the outside of the courthouse, right? Like,
we don't meet a lawyer or really see
the kid go yay or any of that. We don't need any of that.
It doesn't. I mean, it still works though, I guess.
Oh no, it works fantastically. That's what I'm saying is like those decisions to be so metered in the approach. If this is his first directorial debut, like, wow, man, that is really some incredible confidence in saying this will be enough. This will be enough that as a film it does it. Now, again, like a lot of award-winning movies that we've reviewed in the past, didn't do great. Kind of bombed on its release. It was not. It took years for it to be considered the classic that it is.
It's a small movie for sure. You know, I mean, again, 90-something% of this movie is in this 16 by 24 foot room, right?
Right, exactly.
And it's the hottest day of the year, so that's setting the stage for these intense conversations. And one thing I think it inherits from like a play perspective that I think actually really works here is we have these, you know, this beginning scene where everyone's kind of filing in. We get these side conversations. You know, some guys think, oh, it's an open and shut case. I got tickets to the game tonight. You know, hey, what do you do? I paint houses. I'm an architect, whatever it may be. And you kind of get to know these guys. And then we start getting into the deliberation. But I think what it does that a play would do is sit on those conversations, those side conversations. We almost have an intermission in between votes throughout the movie, right? We have these little intermissions where these little side conversations are happening. I think it's really fascinating to kind of sit and, because from an audience perspective, you can't have this intense conversation about the case all the time. You can't have your foot on the pedal the entire time figuring out all the stuff around this case. You have to ease up and let the audience kind of like relax a little bit and like, okay, what's it ramping up to next? And so, I don't know, brilliant stuff though.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point is this idea, and it starts from the very beginning, which is, it's kind of surprising that there aren't, and maybe it's just because this planted the flag so strongly that no one else wants to go near it to touch it, but this idea of a group of strangers who have not said a word to each other, but have all watched the same thing. Now asking that group of people to come to the same conclusion, and none of them know each other from anybody. What's going to come out just through osmosis of the conversation speaks to all their weaknesses, all their hopes, their dreams, their prejudices, their fears, like all of it. And in the most interesting way, where it's such fertile ground to let, you know, we talked about this when we did A Few Good Men, where Sorkin's dialogue in a very short sentence is able to pepper into it so many layers of nuance that speak to something that's happening to that character or has happened to that character. And we see the same thing here, even in that opening shot that you're talking about, where the camera's kind of just moving through the room, and some people are talking about it being an open shut case. Somebody's got tickets to the ball game. You know, some of them are bored and jaded. Some of them are quizzical, asking lots of questions. Some of them are joking around. Then we have Henry Fonda just sitting and staring out the window, very, very serious. And even down to Henry Fonda saying, I just want to talk just for an hour. I haven't decided yet. And
he's the not guilty vote, right?
He's the only not guilty vote. And just from making that one opinion, the man next to him automatically says, so I'm a bad guy because I decided quick? Right? And you're like, boy, we're already off to the races. Like, we're already off to the races in this way of like people second guessing themselves just by one sentence that another person says, them saying, well, whoa, hey, I'm not like that. But immediately people's racism is popping out, people's own affectation of things that have happened to them, right? The oldest jury member has lots of thoughts about old people. Right? Like, oh, he's walking with a limp, or she wears glasses, but she didn't wear them in here because she's probably vain. I've known women like that in my life. And so everyone's perspective and everyone's observation, just in their little lines where they're talking about the thing that they saw and what their opinion of that thing is now, automatically reflects all these deeper things about themselves. And like the writing here in that way is just magnificent.
Yeah, you know, I think it goes into a lot of what the subjective truth actually is, right? Everyone has their own personal biases. Facts. So what are facts? That's reasonable doubt. So much of what they're discussing and trying to prove throughout this is convenient for them, right? it's a great premise and a great procedural to go through this, but they just want to get out of there and go to the game. They don't care about this kid's life, and Henry Fonda, and even in black and white, has these piercing blue eyes.
Totally.
And he's wearing the white suit. Basically, he's the only one, so he's definitely the one who sticks out. And he, like you said, he just wants to talk. He just doesn't know yet. He just wants to talk about it. He doesn't want to decide so quickly. And we get a little bit of the history of the case and this kid, but you can't deny the biases that creep up here. Part of me was watching this, even though this movie, I believe, came out or probably after 12 Angry Men, but something like Rashomon, where you get three sides of a story, right? And you get these perspectives, and this is three sides of a story. It's not even their story, right? It's someone else's story.
Well, and that's one of the things, I would say that's one of the most brilliant pieces, and I guess this more than the film goes to the script and the original play, but I think the fact that we see zero of the trial, and we only see people bringing up the different witnesses, bringing up the different statements, bringing up the different pieces of evidence, and then each of those people all being like, well, no, she was credible, and then somebody else being like, and what about that guy? And it's like, we never saw he or her or the evidence or the knife, or we never saw any of these things when they were brought up during the trial, only, again, colored through the opinions of the jury members who are bringing them up, which means, like, as you're saying, the three different sides to a story become so powerful because they can either be immediately taken with a grain of salt or not. And it isn't that Henry Fonda's going, he's innocent. In fact, the way he describes it is, it's possible, not probable, but possible. And
it's
that
something
is
he says
doubt,
through the
right?
It's something he says through the whole movie, but he's like, is it possible? Like, he's not asking, did it happen? He's saying, but it is possible. When he ends up, kind of making all of his points throughout this movie, he gradually makes different points and grabs onto different things and has an idea of what's going on. I think, we get the details of the case, the motive, the witnesses, the testimony. There's an argument between the boy and his father. What does that mean? Then we get into some of, I think this kid and the defendant is kind of inherently non-descriptive, but they talk about his bad upbringing. He's a wild, angry kid.
He's a ghetto kid. You know how they are, right? Them.
They just think he's guilty, right?
Yeah.
I just think he's guilty. That's all. That's all I need. I got all the details of the case, but the slum backgrounds are a menace to society and all this stuff. And
they can't change, right? Like they're not going to change. And the way that we delve into nurture versus nature, how we get into these concepts of masculinity, what it means to be a man, toxic masculinity, the inherent racism of the ghetto kids and them, and they can't change. Well, like all of that again, like just brilliant.
I agree. And I may be jumping ahead a little bit here, but Ed Begley has this pretty much racist rant at the end, near the end of the movie, that completely changes the tone of the room, the tone of how he looks at himself, a variety of things, all these inherent biases that he's not thinking about. He's just speaking freely like it's the 50s, which it is.
Totally. That part's amazing. And one of my favorite moments of that part is when he's going on that rant and blissfully unaware, like he'd probably be the first guy to be like, I'm not racist, right? Like, or whatever, like has no idea that when he's saying them with a capital T, that it's like the most racist thing in the world.
They get drunk, that's how they are, they don't care, he knows them, they're no good,
right?
They put their backs on him, though. I don't know, through the ethnic background of this this kind of teenager who's deliberately left, I think, unstated. I'm not exactly sure, exactly his race, but I think
I like that it's vague. It's vague. It helps that out a bit. And what's interesting is the William Friedkin remake of this in '97.
Friedkin did that?
I
didn't know that.
4 of the jury members are black, which alters all of these conversations. But the part I love from this moment, where like you said, it does change the entire vibe of the room. One of the other characters, and I can't remember who it is, gets up and starts getting in his face about that. And he's like, and he turns around. And the character says, I'm talking, don't walk away. And the old man stops him and gets in front of him and says, he can't hear you. He never will. Yep. And I was like, whoa, that is so powerful. Like, he'll never hear, like, you're wasting your breath because he will never hear that, what you're trying
surprisingly relevant, right?
Exactly, man. It's totally relevant.
There's a moment, too, that I thought was also relevant where he's like, let him have the guts to do what's right. Vote with your conscience. And also, please vote with your conscience.
Yes.
But it's just wild to see the ups and downs of all these people and their justifications for why they may change their mind or why they eventually all change their minds. Pretty interesting.
Oh, completely. Well, and the term that people kept saying, it was like a mantra. And it blew my mind because it's exactly what you're talking about. And it's this like pinpoint precision that it got to the heart of that is that everyone's hypothesis of what happened is colored by their own life experience. And the mantra that everyone kept saying is, if I were to do that, right? And they're using their own reasonable attitude, right? As someone who hasn't had this life experience, like the life experience of this boy. If I were to do that, I would have done this and this and this. Well, if I were to do that, I would have done this, right?
Yeah, well, the Hispanic guy in the jury, who really is the only non-white guy here, has this remarkable speech about the democracy of what it's like to be a juror, and that it's something unselfish and you need to take it seriously and all this stuff. And then Warden gets on his ass saying, these guys come over, they're just trying to run the place,
Exactly.
He's just speaking his mind like you did, like you haven't even had the balls to, actually. So.
Well, and again, in that same way, when the old man, it's probably his best line in the movie, but they're like, well, the old man said that he saw the boy when he got up and left, and he's like, he was positive. And the old man on the jury says, he's an old man, how could he be positive about anything? And he's speaking like as the oldest jury member, which again has this like great kind of pinpoint precision to it of speaking as, he's putting himself into that perspective, but almost in a derogatory way. It is like, for a film that has one room, 12 actors, and that the most exciting thing that's happened weeks ago, and these 12 people are talking about it. It is
pretty
so knee deep in drama, and just the illumination of why Lee Cobb's character, why juror number 3 knows he did it. When he throws down his wallet and that picture of his estranged son comes out.
Well, he makes it personal, right?
He's colored it through his own eyes.
Yep.
He says, oh, well, finally my son, I turned him into a man, and he took a swing at me, and I haven't talked to him in 2 years. And you're like, of course you believe that the son would kill the father then. Of course you do, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's so, but it's, God, it's powerful, and it's so defeating,
I think his character is extremely important in this movie, and watching this movie in 2020, knowing it holds up, halfway through this movie, this room is divided, just like our nation right now. And
6-6, yep.
And, there's things that get said like, I'm sick and tired of facts. It's inconvenient for them, right?
God.
And, like, quit thinking too much. You get mixed up. And I'm just like,
oh,
wow,
God,
like,
it's so
painfully relevant how some people view other people in this world.
Exactly. Well, and how everyone, it's funny. So there's a podcast I've been diving really deep into lately called You're Wrong About, and it's kind of a true crime show, but it also like explores, basically like goes back through old cases, and they just go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But the hosts are fantastic, and the one host, who's actually, her name is Sarah Marshall, which I think is kind of funny. But Sarah Marshall, they were doing a whole series on OJ. They were talking about jury members, and she made this point, and she said it so saliently. I've never really heard it so perfectly crystallized in this way. She said, everyone assumes that everyone else's experiences are the same kind of experiences that they've had in their lives. And she said, and if you come from a white upper middle class background, that can have devastating consequences if you make that assumption. And I was like,
absolutely.
Damn, there you go, right? And that's exactly what's happening in this room with these 12 guys. If I were to do that, if I was in their shoes, if I was the one to, you go, but that's not everyone's life experiences, right? And a lot of times, like, someone else's life experiences are wildly different than your own. And if you've had a fairly privileged upbringing, you making that assumption about everybody else means that you could send some poor kid to the electric chair who maybe didn't do this thing, because you're just assuming if it were me, I'd be more reasonable, right? Sure. And I think that is like,
you have no way to measure that. I
have no way to measure that. Oh, it's like
the
mind blowing.
Yeah, no. You know, Lee Cobb is so emotional here, especially by the end, where everyone slowly starts turning, which is really fun to watch. And you see all these little things about the case that Henry Fonda starts proving wrong, and, you know, it takes this many steps and how many seconds, and they're talking about seeing, you know, the witnesses and all this stuff. And really the only case for the prosecution was the witnesses. Yeah. And I thought very much so that right from the beginning that they could easily both, maybe it's because we've been watching too many courtroom dramas, but I'm like, those people could easily have not seen what they thought they saw.
It could go. It could go 100 different ways. Yeah.
But Lee Cobb's character, you know, basically keeps siding. The more people go against him, is that I'm entitled to my own opinion, right? I'm entitled to it. But by the end of this movie, his opinion has exhausted him, right? And he's just like starts crying and is like not guilty. And you're like, holy fuck, he turned everyone in the room.
Yeah, he broke. He finally, he even broke the racist before he broke Lee Cobb, right? He which is just amazing, because it's like that guy still might have his very twisted image of what immigrants or brown people or as he said it, like ghetto kids or whatever are, but he couldn't hold up against the scrutiny of it's possible, right? It's not probable. But could it have happened? And that is such a different, that's how you can turn things on a dime like that. And it is.
I think the example of the broker guy trying to remember the movies he saw on Monday was a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Completely.
Right? He's like, okay, so what'd you see? What was the second feature? Who was in it? You know, and just keeps asking them. He's like, and that was without any undue pressure of being beaten by your father.
No trauma in his life. Well, and that's just it, is that Lee Cobb's character is like, I could remember the movies, and you're like, it's not about you, right? It's not, yes, you're trying to find, whether it's suspicion on one side or even empathy on the other, trying to put yourself with your experience into someone else's shoes is a fool's game, right? Like it's always going to have these problems with it where it does not automatically resonate with that person's experience in life.
Again, I think this is a wild examination of the just humans, right? The social experiment. I mean, this could be a psychological experiment, you know, Stanford prison experiment type of thing, right? Where like you might as well, like you hear this case, all this stuff, it's fake. You go into a room, see what really happens.
Well, and then if you were going to do that, you would have a switch to make that fan not work. Right? You'd be like, now make the fan not work. It works for the first 2 hours, but as it gets more and more human in that room, then you make the fan not work.
Pretty amazing movie. Totally holds up. Surprisingly relevant still. I
really
think
relevant. Sadly relevant.
Sadly relevant, but that's what makes it timeless, right? And
it's
that's why it keeps being made a play, and it's been remade a variety of times. I don't know if you've ever seen the Inside Amy Schumer skit where she spoofs this.
No.
And it's 12 Angry Men, and it's deciding if she's sexy enough to have her own TV show. And it is so well done. I have to say, but I'm a huge fan. So, anyways, you know, all in all, this is only one day for a murder case. So these guys want to get out of there like lickety split. I'm like, murder cases these days, I assume like you know,
again, I just referenced the O.J. Simpson case. Like, how long were those jurors in there?
Forever, weeks. So
I think they're still in there deliberating.
In that perspective, that they're all complaining about being in there for a few hours or a handful of hours. They didn't even eat.
No, yeah, they didn't even get dinner or hotel rooms. They're
So what are you
fine.
complaining about?
Maybe in 57 is a little more open and shut, but
Last thing I'll say is I did feel it was a little unnecessary to have the scene outside at the end.
I didn't want to know their names.
Yeah, I don't need to know your names. And that's really pretty much the only reason they would have that scene. So,
yeah, and it was unnecessary.
Kind of tacked on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little tacked on. I agree.
I could see the production studio like saying, hey, we need some kind of closure here. But as an audience member, I'd much rather just cut to credits.
Totally.
Stay in that room. Don't go outside again.
Last thing I'll say, I loved the weird soundtrack here with those strange little like drum sounds and like the little shakers that dunk 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 dunk.
I got to be honest, I didn't even notice the sound.
Oh, really? I loved it where it came in because it was this slow little drum and like a shaker kind of a sound and little clicking sounds. And it felt like it was helping to show the slow kind of steady, monotonous passage of time. And it only cropped up about 3 or 4 times during little transitions. But I loved it. It was it's like something that you would hear on an old episode of like Twilight Zone or something. It was very cool.
Sure.
Awesome. Fantastic movie. So glad to revisit it.
Classic. Yeah. Fun to revisit. Excited to get to talk about it. Next week, we'll finish out the festival with Amistad, and then we're going to do our Forgotten Gem of Primal Fear. So stick around for that. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every week. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next week. When did the movie World Trade Center come out with Nicolas Cage? It's an Oliver Stone film, right? I'm pretty sure it's an Oliver Stone.
I think
film.
it is.
Yeah,
I think it is.
Which is weird that he didn't do a conspiracy theory thing with it, right?
Yeah,
he wasn't like it's an
easily
inside job. Well, like he's such a conspiracy nut, you just think that he would, but
2006.
Okay, 2006.
Mm-hmm. And yes, you're correct. Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone. So here's the question: 5 years after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. So that means by 2025, at the bare minimum, if not sooner, if we haven't eclipsed that already, we'll get our first coronavirus drama film, big budget Hollywood film, right?
Oh, so, if not earlier.
If not earlier. But there's that too soon thing, right? But you're like, when World Trade Center came out, I was like, shit, I thought it was still too soon, but okay, I guess we're gonna do it.
These days, I don't know how much that holds sway. I'm just thinking, like, I remember even when Three Kings came out, it was like, oh, that's pretty close.
Yeah, you're like,
but if you think about it in context to the movies that were made about World War II or Vietnam War. I guess Vietnam War was probably a little closer, but like movies about World War II weren't even that wasn't even on the table.
That is true. Well, like what was the Vietnam TV show? You remember
MASH?
this? No. That's first of all, that's the Korean War. But second of all, remember it was like, and it had Paint It Black as its theme song, and it was about like the nurse, and it was like called. I'll find it and put it up here. But anyway, like.
The nurses and doctors.
Yeah, and it was like early 80s. It's not MASH.
It was a comedy.
No, it's not a comedy. I'll put it up here if I can't remember. But I remember Paint It Black was the theme song, and it had helicopters at the beginning. Anyway, that was like mid 80s, and you go, yeah, it's not that far removed. Here's the thing: the coronavirus, big budget Hollywood drama, got kind of an action drama, right? It's got to be somebody like in New York. And he's kind of a scientist. It's got to have that like disaster film kind of setup to it where like he's trying to let people know or whatever. Or she. Sorry. Equal opportunity. Here's the question. Who directs it and who stars in it? Because it's only going to be 5 years from now. So it's
Well-
going to be super soon.
It's hard to say who stars in it because I don't know what it's about outside of the pandemic. If we're going big blockbuster kind of action type pandemic thing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's probably Brad Pitt, right?
Oh man, you're blindsiding me here.
I don't know. This is all off the top of my head.
That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like John Cusack's had his day in the sun with disaster movies, and it's never really worked out.
Yeah, and I wondered too. Speaking of 2012, I also wondered if Roland
what I'm gonna
Emmerich
say?
was going to direct it.
I'm gonna say Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's gonna be in it.
Ooh.
He's gonna be the main star.
Okay.
And
Okay.
let's give it to Ryan Coogler, because why the hell not?
Oh wow. Okay. I was totally going Roland Emmerich. I thought we were just going to have another.
I mean, that's the obvious. If
But
we're
it's
really
not
gonna...
flashy enough, right? There's no tidal waves.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It's gonna be someone who's directed an Avengers movie, right? Like it's gonna be
Yes.
someone in the Marvel universe.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.